Your body makes vitamin D according to need, and the vitamin D is not stable. It is a fat soluble vitamin, and your liver takes it up and uses it as needed, kind of thing. Because if that's not the active form, what the sun makes, you hold on to it, or the pill that you take, that's not the active form. The active form is actually made in the kidneys and the liver. It's the 125 dihydroxyvitamin D, which is really just used on a very local level. Vitamin D is not even a vitamin, it's a hormone.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Fixed Blood Sugar webinar. How are you guys? We are excited that you're here. Hello, all of you on YouTube, Facebook. This is going to be a fun webinar today. We're actually just chatting before this. We're going to be talking about the importance of vitamin D. And so I hope it's okay to share this, Joe, or maybe tell them what you just found out.
Yeah, I had my vitamin D levels tested along with some other things back in June, and it was surprisingly on the low end. It was like 30 something. So, hey, Dr. Saunders is here. Woo!
Hey.
We got the expert now.
I was trying to log into the Healthy Heart webinar.
I wondered if that's what you were doing. That's funny. We were just talking about, we're going to be talking about vitamin D today. And Joe just had mentioned that he got his levels checked and they were low in June when he's spending time probably outdoors. So why would that be, Dr. Saunders?
Because your body makes vitamin D according to need, and the vitamin D is not stable. It is a fat soluble vitamin, and your liver takes it up and uses it as needed, kind of thing. Because if that's not the active form, what the sun makes, you hold on to it, or the pill that you take, that's not the active form. The active form is actually made in the kidneys and the liver. It's the 125 dihydroxyvitamin D, which is really just used on a very local level. Vitamin D is not even a vitamin, it's a hormone. And that's kind of interesting. So it's not directly related to how much sunshine you get.
Very interesting. Another thing that we found was interesting was that I just went and grabbed my bottle of Cinechroma. So we haven't introduced anyone or anything. So those of you joining, you're just getting this all off the cuff here. But I went and grabbed Cinechroma because I wanted to show you guys this today. And we're going to talk a little bit about it because it does have vitamin D in it. And Joe had said he hadn't been taking his vitamin D for a little bit. And so kind of thinking that's probably why his levels were pretty low. So
yep, I think my levels they used to be like in the 70s, which is really good. And now in June, I guess they were like 37 or something like that, which was on the lower end. So I was surprised. So this is my chiropractor that tested, and she's like, "Yeah, do you have vitamin D3 with K2?" I'm like, "We do actually, in our own product. I should probably be taking Cinechroma." So she's like, "Yep, take 2 a day. You'll be good." So,
and just so all of us know, Joe, how did you get those levels tested? What did you need to do?
They had a little, actually like a blood test. I think it was actually a finger poke test for vitamin D, which, and there was a couple other things I think they were testing, omega-3 levels, omega-3, 6, 9, all that. So, which those were a little bit better than they were. So, but yeah, just typically requires a blood test.
Okay. Very interesting. Okay, guys, so welcome. We have quite a few of you hopping on here. I think I saw a message from the Johnson Lee. So that's awesome. Good to see you, buddy. Funny thing, my kids started school today and they have an obsession with tennis shoes right now. That's not the correct word. I don't know the words that they would use for their shoe obsession.
Sneakers?
Yeah, mostly like dunks and just whatever. And so we have Johnson, who is a part of our team. And so we often have to call him and talk about shoes with him. What shoes should they try to get? What's cool? What they're like an investment now. And Johnson has quite the collection. So anyway, fun little fact about someone on our team. But anyway, we're glad that you guys are all here. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of vitamin D. And this has come up so many times. And it feels timely for me. I'm in South Dakota where we're going to enter fall here, where there's a little bit less sun around. And so I want to kind of see if that makes a difference. I want to hear from Dr. Saunders about that. He kind of gave us a little sneak peek into how this may go, but this is going to be a good webinar. So if you are on Zoom, feel free to comment in the Q&A. It's kind of the easiest place for us to take questions. YouTube, Facebook, go ahead and comment, and we'll do our best to get to as many of those as possible. You'll also find a link in there. YouTube, you'll find a link. YouTubers, you'll find a link there for bartonwebinar.com, some other places that you can go to learn more about who we are. Maybe you want to see past webinars, learn more about our products, or maybe you're like, who even is this Dr. Saunders guy? I've never heard of him. Well, you're going to want to learn about him. And usually we try to bring up at least one interesting fact about him on every webinar. So you know what? Let's do that. Let's do that now, Dr. Saunders. Can you give us some information about you that maybe we're not all familiar with?
Let's see. I have 3 things that I do for fun. I cook, and I'm a pretty good cook, at least others tell me. I build things, and by building things, I mean big things like condominiums and houses, and I build things, design and build ideally, and I write, and I've written 18 books. I don't let anybody read them. I've never taken them an editor. I've only published 1 of them, and because they're not all done. But I have like 3 or 4 of them that are like 300-page books, like they're big. And so anyway, I have an interesting program on how to grow up.
Wow. Seriously, guys, I'm not kidding. We've done what, 220 webinars. I think I learned something new about Dr. Saunders every time. And
Are we supposed to grow up? Is that like?
No, it's how to grow up in every area of your life. So I take 8 different areas of life. So physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, ethical, and moral, and I put all 8 of them on a scale of the infant. An emotional infant is completely dependent on other people for their emotional health. They need a constant connection, communication emotionally. Whereas as we grow up, we become more and more independent until we're ideally at 18, we're adults, right? And we get to be completely independent. But when I got married to my second wife, after 20 years of marriage and a divorce, I got married to my second wife. She had a 4-year-old son. And I looked at him and I go, oh my gosh, I am the same emotionally. I'm the same as him. I'm an emotional 4-year-old. Because we were on the same level, and I was jealous of him. So I started working on that and looking at how do people grow up in all these different ways? How do you grow up financially? How do you grow up mentally? How do you grow up psychologically? So I put it all together, and I wrote a book about it, and it's fascinating. I've never let anybody read it.
Very interesting. Wow. Well, let us know when you're ready to publish that. We can sell a few copies here.
Yeah.
I think I know some people who may need it. Okay.
Yeah, just tell them, hey, here, take this, just grow up.
Yeah, I think they'll be receptive to it. Quick disclaimer though, Dr. Saunders is not your doctor. And so any of the things that we discuss here today, please consult with your personal healthcare provider. Not only is he not your doctor, he doesn't know your health history, right? So, and everyone is so different. So take our advice and bring it to your medical practitioner. Okay. Lots of questions already coming in. So let's go ahead and get this party started. Today, we're talking about the importance of vitamin D. Dr. Saunders, just let us know, in case you were not familiar, that vitamin D is actually a hormone. Did you know that? And Dr. Saunders, please tell us why that is.
Okay, so vitamins are chemicals of various kinds that we need to survive. So vita comes from vital, which means life. So their vitamins are the chemicals that they started finding that were needed for life. And the way they found them is people were deficient in them. So someone had kwashiorkor, and they go, what the heck is that? Well, if you're missing certain amino acids, then you don't make proteins very well, and your body is not put together well, and you'll die from not having enough protein. So, and then there was beriberi. If you don't have enough B vitamins, then you're going to die from B vitamin deficiency. If you don't have enough vitamin C, you get scurvy, and you can die from scurvy. And so when they found out that all it took for scurvy is a little bit of vitamin C, starting out with the lime juice, right? The limeys on the ship. We talked about that before. Then what they say, oh, here's the vital ingredient that's required for life. Because if you don't have it, that's why people were dying. Beriberi, the same thing, the B vitamins. So if you have any chemical that you require to eat that you can't make in your body, they've called a vitamin. So when they found a problem called rickets, and rickets was a bone disorder that caused people to get really thin bones, and their bones would break and their bones would bend. They wouldn't have any calcium on their bones, so they would have the protein would be there for the bones, but there's no calcium, so their legs would be really bowed, for example, and their chest would be they get where the calcium is supposed to meet the cartilage part of the rib, that you get a ball on there. They used to call it a rachitic rosary because there would be these balls that would go down the chest that you could feel under the skin, you could see under the skin. And so people would die from that, from rickets too. So when they found out that there was a chemical that they could get out of fish oil that would cure rickets, then they say, oh, this is a vitamin. And they isolated it and said vitamin D. Okay, so vitamin D cures the disease called rickets. Today, we don't call it rickets anymore. We call it osteoporosis. So it just has a different name. And the reason for that is so that they could have a drug instead of using the vitamin. Instead of using vitamin D, they use a drug. And it's really not a good idea to use those drugs, by the way. It's definitely use the vitamins, not the drug for this kind of thing. So they said, since it came out of a fish, the fish oil, that they said that's a vitamin D. Well, it turns out that our body makes vitamin D. So if you've ever, there's a couple of movies, plays. One's called Heidi, and that's an old, we had the book, and so I read the book to my kids. And Heidi lived with her grandfather in the mountains in Switzerland, and then she was sent down to work in a rich person's house, and there was Clara there, her friend, who became her friend. And Clara was in a wheelchair, and Clara couldn't get around, and she had to be pushed around, and Heidi was supposed to be her companion and, get her stuff for her and all that, because she couldn't move and couldn't do stuff. Well, it turns out that Clara had rickets, but they didn't know that at the time. They lived in Frankfurt, Germany, and Frankfurt, there was a lot of smoke. They used coal, and there was like coal smoke. And the smoke prevents the ultraviolet light from getting down to the street level. So Clara wasn't getting any vitamin D from the sun. So the story of Heidi is she invites Clara up to the mountains with her grandfather, and Clara is miraculously healed. And she gets up and walks, and everybody's like, oh, amazing. And they said, it's the sunshine and the fresh mountain air. Well, yeah, it was the fresh mountain air, but the sunshine actually made vitamin D so that she could heal her body. The other one was, if you've ever seen The Secret Garden, that's one that also was a young man that had rickets, and he was, until he got out in the garden, got out in the sunshine, and he got well. Same sort of story. So, since we can make it in our bodies, it's not really a vitamin, but it's actually related to steroid hormones. Vitamin D is related to cortisone and testosterone and estrogen and progesterone. It's the same structure as those steroid hormones. And it has multiple effects on the body. So everybody thinks of it as, oh, vitamin D is just needed to get calcium into your body so that you can put calcium on your bones. But that's not the entire function. This is a hormone that affects every cell in your body in different ways. So it's really important. So for example, the vitamin D binding protein is called macrophage activating factor, and that activates your macrophages. What's macrophages? Well, that's your cellular immunity. Those are the cells that if you have a bad cell, then the macrophage comes and goes, gobbles it up and spits out all the amino acids and everything, just literally gobbles it up, digests it, and then spits out all the proteins and stuff so that they can be used by the body in other ways. So these macrophages are going around taking out cancer cells, they're taking out infected cells, and they're really, really important for viral infections. So, during COVID-19, everybody's saying, get your vitamin D. Why? Well, they did a whole bunch of studies all over the world, and they found that even in the Philippines, where there's a whole bunch of sunshine, that the people with the highest vitamin D levels had the lowest incidence of dying and of being in an intensive care unit. So that's how important vitamin D is. And other studies that were done, for example, in the Midwest, in the United States, in Europe, all of them showed improvement of function and prevention of severe disease with vitamin D. If you take vitamin D after you get sick, it's not that good. Why? Well, now that you're sick, you've already had all those viruses get into the cells, and they're making new viruses, and they're popping out, and now you have billions of viruses, and they're measured. When they measure viruses in your blood, they're measuring millions of copies per cubic centimeter of blood. So this much blood, millions of viruses are in there. That's how much virus there is. So that's when you're sick. So by that time, taking the vitamin D, it's too late, because what you needed is the macrophages. When the cell first got infected, the very first cell that gets infected, the macrophage comes over and goes, boop, you're dead, and digests the whole thing and spits it out, and there's no virus anymore. It disappears completely, it gets digested. So that's why you need the vitamin D before you get sick and not after you get sick.
So how much? What are we talking here for amounts of vitamin D? You're getting a lot of questions.
This is a really interesting question, and I've researched this quite a bit. And there's a lot of evidence to show that as you get lower in vitamin D, the death rate goes up quite rapidly, quite dramatically, from all kinds of things: cancer, infectious diseases, especially viruses, inflammation. This hormone is really important for the function of a lot of things in the body. And then that drops, and then it drops to a minimum amount, just a little below the average death rate, right around 50. So Joe was saying that his was 70 and then 35. And actually right in between there is the optimum level, because as you raise the vitamin D, there was a study done in Denmark where they looked at vitamin D levels and death rate, and they showed that lower is definitely bad, but as you get higher than 50, the death rate goes up a little bit, and then over 100, it goes up a little faster. So it's one of those hormones that more is not better necessarily, that you can take, like, for a brief period of time, like if you're exposed to an illness and you haven't gotten sick yet, like somebody just coughed on me and they're super sick and I don't want to get sick. That's when you take it. And that's what they did. They did a study in a nursing home in Canada, and they found that they would use 50,000 units, and that's like 10 of those 5,000 pills, those 5,000 unit pills. And they would give 50,000 units once a day for 3 days for everyone who was exposed to the flu. And they prevented, they didn't have any, the year that they did that, they didn't have any admissions to the hospital for the flu. So you can still get sick with vitamin D. It's not like the miracle cure. But what you don't do is get severely ill, because those macrophages will take out the cells that are infected and prevent you from getting super sick.
Interesting. Okay, so how might a vitamin D deficiency affect someone who has type 2?
Okay, this is actually really important. So remember, it's a hormone, and a hormone affects, I just told you two things, the calcium and also the immune system. But this hormone is actually important for the utilization of glucose, the way glucose is used, and it improves the ability for your body to convert from using sugar for energy and using fat for energy. So it allows you to be more resilient in using your different types of energy. So you can switch from fat burning to sugar burning pretty easily when you have enough of this hormone, vitamin D. If you don't, then you don't switch very easily, and you end up getting more insulin resistant more easily because some of the cells, or a lot of the cells, can't switch very quickly to fat burning, so they require more sugar. And remember, you want to burn about 60% fat from your calories, 60% and 40% sugar, glucose. That, when diabetes turns around, just the opposite. You know, most people are like 60% glucose and 40% fat. That's not healthy because it's not consistent, it's not stable. So vitamin D is very important for making you sensitive to insulin.
Okay. We had a question about if someone can take too much vitamin D, and you had said that the death rates rise with higher vitamin D levels, but what are the side effects? Maybe if I take too much vitamin D in the next 3 days, more than likely I'm not going to die, but what might I find?
Oh, yeah, that's a different question entirely. Most of the time, nothing at all. If everything else is functioning well, nothing at all. However, if you take like those 50,000 unit doses 3 times a day, you could absorb a whole bunch of calcium from your food that you wouldn't normally absorb and get hypercalcemia. And that's where the toxicity of vitamin D is. That's the side effect, or where you have too much of the hormone is because it causes your intestines to absorb more calcium. And so you're eating a bunch of things, or you're taking calcium pills, and you're absorbing more of that calcium. So your blood level of calcium goes up, and that causes spasms of muscles, because that calcium magnesium balance is really important. It causes nausea, vomiting. It can cause like brain fog or difficulty thinking. So mostly people who have toxicity are complaining of nausea kinds of problems.
Okay. So out of, like we've talked about with a lot of our supplements, has kind of come from Dr. Saunders doing a lot of testing and finding that a lot of his patients were deficient in many of the things that help to set them up for success when they're trying to prevent disease or beat disease, or, you know, just be healthy in general. And so Cinechroma came from that, and it does have vitamin D. Now, our Cinechroma says, we talk about this a lot. You can take 1 per day. We'll have 5,000 IUs of vitamin D3 in it. Why do we put the vitamin K with this?
Okay, vitamin K, if you're absorbing all that calcium and you don't have enough vitamin K, that's where you see the problem of hypercalcemia and the toxicity of vitamin D. If you have enough vitamin K, guess what? That vitamin K helps you take all that calcium and put it into your bones. So you don't put the calcium into the arteries and everything.
Okay, and then you would recommend that 5,000 as a good dose for a day.
Yeah, as I've done more research, so when we first looked at that, I go, okay, what's the optimum level? Well, 5,000 gets most people between the 40 and 60 range, which is that optimum, that perfect place where you want to be. And then some people want to be in the 100 range, 80 to 100, in which case 2 capsules would work. But as more research is done, man, I look at that and I like, just as a general supplement for like everybody in the country, Synachroma would be great for assuring that people are able to use their blood sugar properly. They would be less likely to get diabetes and obesity. We looked around at options or what was available out there, and most of them, they just jam pack a whole bunch of crap in there. And they have this long list of all these vitamins and minerals and stuff you don't need. This is just the essence of what you need. This is all. Vitamin D, what are the other ones? Vitamin K,
chromium,
selenium, chromium, vanadium. Yeah, this is like a great type 2 supplement for everybody.
Right. And I think everyone on our team takes this as
well.
It
gives you exactly the amount of vitamin D you need every day.
And I think, I know we're going to get questions about this. People were saying, well, what if I take 2? Is that okay? And like Dr. Saunders says, that is okay too. If you decide maybe you're already taking other supplements and you just want to do 50 IUs 1 time per week. I know Dr. Saunders has done that for years. Does it make a difference? Have you found any new research on that? If that's good or bad or indifferent?
No, some people just need extra for a short period of time, but even then we haven't recommended taking 2 a day, except people who are really high or they find they're deficient and it makes a big difference, because we've had people say that they started on Synachroma and their blood sugars came down to normal without any change in their diet. And sometimes it's just because of a deficiency. In that case, yeah, I'd take 2 a day for a month or so and then take 1 a day.
Really good questions coming in. Brandon said, is there one vitamin D that is more valuable compared to others?
Yeah, vitamin D3 and D2 are the main ones that are available. D3 is the one your body makes. D2 is an analog that's made actually by a fungus, mushrooms, yeast. That form, the D2 form, is about 15% bioactive. It does work. It does help you absorb calcium. It does act as the hormone, but not completely and in all ways. So one of the things it doesn't do is help the immune system. The vitamin D binding protein does not increase. You don't have the macrophage activating factor involved with it. So yes, vitamin D can be a substitute. It prevents rickets, the D2. That's the prescription form. So when you go to a doctor and they say, oh yeah, take 50,000 units of vitamin D once a week, and they give you a prescription, that's vitamin D2. And it's okay, but it doesn't take the place. You still need vitamin D3.
Guys, that site that I was showing you was bartonnutrition.com. You can use code webinar25 and you'll save 25% on anything on that site. Someone had asked, let me see here. Carl, can you take too much chromium in a day?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can get toxic on anything that you take too much of. So the amount that we have is 200 micrograms, which is like 1/5 of a high dose that somebody deficient would take, about 1 milligram. 200 micrograms is an amount that is going to be sufficient and is not going to, there's no way you can overdose on that. You'd have to take an awful lot of them to overdose. But selenium, the same thing. Selenium, you can overdose on that too. And in fact, selenium has a lower amount to overdose, because I know there were weight loss clinics that were using chromium because it helps you use sugar more efficiently. So they were giving pretty high doses, 2 and 5 milligrams of chromium. and hardly any toxicity was seen. But selenium in fairly low doses, in the terms of 1 to 2 to 5 milligrams, you can get toxic on it.
Aubrey says, what are the best food sources of vitamin D?
Very good. Remember, it's not a vitamin, it's a hormone. So it's not made by anyone except you. You make it. So where does it come from in the environment? Can you eat it? Well, what's really interesting is every mammal, in fact, even birds, even invertebrates, vertebrates. I think all vertebrates need vitamin D. So we all need sunshine. The lizards need sunshine. And, so I was reading about, how do chickens, they're feathered, they're all covered with feathers. How are they going to make any vitamin D? So it turns out that the chicken legs secrete the dihydrocholesterol, and they make vitamin D from their chicken legs. And that's how they make it, because that's the only exposed part. Other animals like sheep that are not exposed at all, their skin, they sweat and they make what's called lanolin, and inside that is dihydrocholesterol. And then they lick their fur, and that's how they get their vitamin D, is by licking their fur. So it's just like every vertebrate needs vitamin D, but there's no plant source. There's only animal sources. So where does your vitamin D come from? Well, now it's made in a laboratory with dihydrocholesterol, and they have sun lamps that make it, the exact right ultraviolet light for it. But they used to just scrape the wool, the lanolin from sheep's wool. That is a creamy.
I think they add it in lotions.
What's that?
Don't they add it to lotions?
Oh yeah, they add it to lotions. Lanolin. Yeah, sometimes they'll just add lanolin. So they take the dihydrocholesterol out of the lanolin, and they expose it to ultraviolet light, and then they purify the vitamin D, and that's where it comes from. So even then, it comes from sheep's lanolin, and there's no other source. Or one food source, if you take a teaspoon of cod liver oil, is 400 units of vitamin D. So it's not a lot, and that was enough to cure rickets, but it's not enough for
interesting
functioning of your body.
Okay. Debbie says, I have hyperthyroid, and I was reading not to take vitamin D.
What? For hyperthyroid? Why not? The thyroid, I don't know, the parathyroid glands affect the calcium, or it could be calcium. Sometimes they say don't take vitamin D so you don't get hypercalcemia. That could be if you have hyperthyroid.
Wouldn't that lead to other problems then? If you're not getting vitamin D?
Yeah, you need the vitamin D.
So how can you avoid getting enough, or avoid all the calcium that you could get from it?
Well, you get vitamin K. So you take adequate vitamin K so that all the calcium gets put into your bones, and then you can use your calcium properly. And
I guess I was just thinking if that was something specific to hyperthyroid, but yeah.
No, but remember, the vitamin D that you take is not the active form. It has some activity, but the active form is actually made from that. So the one you take is cholecalciferol, which is 125. It's 25 hydroxy vitamin D, and then it has to go to the kidney and be made into 125 dihydroxy vitamin D. That's the active form, and so that's what's going to cause all the absorption of calcium and prevention of the loss of calcium in your kidneys, so the calcium level goes up. So if your kidneys are making a bunch of it, then there may be another problem too, maybe with the kidneys.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. If you have problems with your kidneys, how much is that affected then?
Yeah.
Okay. Very interesting. Let me see here. Richard says, I have been on the system for 10 weeks. My glucose has gone from 445 to about 130 to 100 now.
Oh my gosh. Good
So
work.
it says, so you guess I can say I've had some success. I'm looking forward to breaking the 100 barrier. Thanks so much for all that you do. Wow. That is
Wow.
amazing and awesome,
Good
Richard.
work.
Keep it up.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
If you guys
Richard,
have no idea.
I didn't do that. You did. I just thought it.
Yes. For real,
Yeah.
you did all the hard work. That is awesome.
Yeah.
For those of you who maybe are like, wait, what is the program that we're talking about? That is the Diabetes Solution Kit. And this is the system that our team and Dr. Saunders have put together. Primarily, that's what we talk about on these webinars. It's broken into a 3-phase kind of system, mostly through eating, stress reduction, exercise, that kind of thing. But there's a lot of really good information in here and teaching. You can find more information about this at bartonwebinar.com. And guys, if you use that code webinar25, you'll save 25% on this as well. So the digital version, you can have that today on your phone, on your tablet, whatever. If you want a hard copy, it costs a little bit more, but you can get that as well, and we'll ship that to you. So that is so awesome. In fact, Richard, I am going to go ahead and share that with our team because they love to learn about that. Some of them are even on right now, but it's so cool because people are working hard to really help people. And so this is exciting. Okay, what else? This is an interesting note here from the Garcias. If you guys look in the Q&A, they have shared a little low carb option, maybe for people who are on phase 2 or 3. It's a low carb tortilla, and the brand is Olay Extreme Wellness. 15 carbs, 11 are dietary fiber, so that's a net carb of 4. Okay.
Are those the almond flour ones? Olay. I don't know.
I don't know if it says that.
My wife gets those. She likes them.
And the Garcia says we cannot go without Mexican foods, so these are great.
I know, right?
Agreed.
Did I tell you my story about the Mexican food?
Yeah, tell us.
There was a woman, and she came into my office, and she had diabetes, and I'm like, okay, so this is what we're going to do. We went through the whole thing, and this is your diet, and you're going to have to, avoid carbohydrates, and so no tortillas, because she was Mexican, or of Mexican descent. And she just broke down bawling, just like tears were squirting out of her eyes. But I'm like, oh no, what happened? What did I say? I'm never gonna lose weight. And I'm like, why not? She goes, because Mexican food is so good.
I agree.
Me too.
That is awesome.
You could go
there are
in the
lots of
world.
options. There are a lot of options.
You can go anywhere in the world and get Mexican food. I was in Poland on Cinco de Mayo, and I go, oh, I'm gonna go to get Mexican food. And I looked it up. There were 5 Mexican restaurants in Warsaw, Poland. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's no. Yeah. Anyway.
That's awesome. All right, here. Let me see. Oh, question about Nervala. Can you take Nervala twice a day?
Yes, you absolutely can. The amount we put in the Nervala is what the studies were done with. And I've done some subsequent research on that, and I found that there were actually other studies done for like Parkinson's disease and other neuropathies that were using much higher doses. And so, 400 milligrams of the benfotiamine and stuff like that. So yeah, you could take 2 a day. Yeah, absolutely.
A fun note here from Valerie. So we have a berberine product, and if you guys aren't familiar with berberine, oh man, just some really cool stuff is coming out about it, and you can find it at bartonnutrition.com. But we've also done some webinars where Dr. Saunders talks about it. So bartonwebinar.com will also give you a link to our YouTube channel, and you can check those out. But Valerie said she did compare the Canadian berberine to ours. There are 17 ingredients in Canadian, and she said I couldn't even pronounce 3/4 of them. Yours has 3. So that was fun. Okay, Rayanne said she just wanted to share some information with everyone. If you want to do a blood test that Dr. Saunders recommends, but maybe your doctor can't do or something. She did find a place where you can order and pay for your own test. There is a link in the webinar chat. I think it's called requestatest.com. I'm not familiar with that. Dr. Saunders, have you ever heard of that?
No, I haven't used that one. There was another one called anytest.com. Anyway, yeah, requestatest.com. Perfect.
Yes. Kevin had asked, can Nervala help with other nerve issues like fibromyalgia?
It can. Remember, whatever you have, it's important to know why you have that, because fibromyalgia, for example, is a syndrome which may have many different causes. And so if your problem is a lack of vitamin B1 or poor circulation, because the glycocalyx in the small vessels is disrupted, then yeah, it'll help. It'll definitely help that. But if it's just constriction of blood vessels from the brain because of stress or other things, then it's not going to help that. So it's important that you know why you have it so that you can deal with the problem instead of just trying to treat the symptom.
Yes. Great question from Johnson Lee. Does sunblock lotion block vitamin D?
Oh, yeah. I forgot to talk about that. Thank you. That is really important because vitamin D, the dihydrocholesterol, is actually under the top layer of skin. So in the stratum corneum, it's right underneath that. And so the ultraviolet light has to penetrate through that top layer of skin to get to that dihydrocholesterol to make the vitamin D. So if you have a sunscreen on top of that and it absorbs all the ultraviolet light, you're not making vitamin D. If you have dark skin that's absorbing all that ultraviolet light, then because it's underneath that, so you're not making vitamin D. So I was told once, I was reading something and they said, it's the sweat that comes out of your skin, makes vitamin D, and it's reabsorbed through the skin. Turns out that's not even the way it works. It's actually underneath the first layer of skin. So yes, sunblock and being tan does decrease your vitamin D.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, because that was a question that someone had said, if they have dark skin, would it be blocked? So very interesting. Okay. Let me see. Edith says that she takes calcium that has vitamin D3 in it.
Calcium. Okay. Yeah. The vitamin D3 calcium has actually been shown to improve like osteoporosis better than vitamin D alone. So yeah, that's a good combination.
John, I don't know if you're talking about vitamin D, but it says, I think it's in T-bone steak, right?
Of course. Everything you want is in T-bone steak.
All right, a couple questions here. Wondering if you know of any natural remedies for gastroparesis.
Okay. Gastroparesis is when the stomach doesn't empty very well. Paresis is like paralysis, where the stomach is just blah, just sitting there not doing anything. So the key to gastroparesis is finding out why it's there, because there are nervous system problems like the vagus nerve that can affect that. And so if you have a problem with the sympathetic nervous system being overstimulated and not enough parasympathetic, then you don't digest very well. So that's one important reason for that, in which case I just went to a conference on this actually, and they said that something that really helped was deep breathing exercises, but not the deep breathing from your chest. It's where you lay down and you don't let your chest rise, and you take a deep breath just from the diaphragm. So you pull your diaphragm down so your stomach gets big, you blow it up your stomach without letting your chest rise. That kind of breathing is stimulating for the phrenic nerves, which is the diaphragm, which is helpful for the vagus nerve, which helps the stomach work better. So, and they've done people who, I've had patients that have this too. They actually did a study. Oh my gosh, this is a crazy study. 1911. So it was many years ago, way before there were any CT scans or MRI scans. How did they know what was going on? Well, they cut people open. And so this study, and this was just a study, this was a medical study. And these people had bloating. So they're like, every time I eat, I get bloated. I get so filled up with gas. And so someone decided to do a study, what's going on? And they want to find out what's going on inside. So they decide that they're going to take 93 people and they're going to open them up, cut them open and look inside, because every time they eat, they get bloated. So these people were bloated and they put them under anesthesia. And in those days, probably ether. They put them under anesthesia and cut them open, and they found nothing. All 93 of them, nothing. They were perfectly normal. The anesthesiologist said, isn't that interesting that as soon as they're anesthetized, the stomach goes down. The stomach goes just down to normal, perfectly normal as soon as they're anesthetized. They couldn't figure out why. It was like 50 years later, the 1960s, when someone said, oh, the diaphragm is spasming, so it pushes everything from the stomach out, because the diaphragm's like this, and when it flattens out, it pushes everything from your abdomen down. So like when you're doing the deep breathing, your belly goes out like you're pregnant, and that's what people were feeling. And so they're breathing, they can breathe because they're breathing with their accessory muscles, which means their ribs. They can still breathe. So they didn't feel the breathing problem. All they felt was the stomach problem. So that they cut open a lot of people for that.
Wow.
Little bit of information.
Wow, that's awesome. I mean, that they now know what it is, but scary for all of those people.
Yeah. So people with diabetes get gastroparesis. It's kind of a common problem. And so the yoga breathing was one. The other thing that they found was fasting. And if you have a 24-hour fast, you need the stomach to be empty for a period of time to get, I think it was cholecystokinin, which would induce the gastric emptying. So you would get better gastric emptying from that. Okay. So 2 things for gastroparesis: yoga breathing and fasting.
Interesting. I often think about, when you learn to sing properly, you learn to sing with your diaphragm. Maybe if you just start singing more correctly, that will help. You can try it.
You know
Let us
what?
how it goes.
You know what? You're pretty smart, because there's actually research on that. Singing does help.
Here we go, guys. I knew it. I see. I'm starting to absorb some of Dr. Saunders' mind here. It's happening after 210 webinars. All right. Here we go. What was that?
You'll get it someday.
Yeah, I know. All right. So Don says, 4 months ago, my A1C was 7.9. Did metformin for 6 weeks, which is a pretty common thing that people use, a common drug for type 2. And Don could not take the side effects. He found our site. He's been taking berberine, synochroma, and vitamin C. 2 weeks ago, his A1C was 7.1. So from 7.9 to 7.1. What is more important? Okay, this is a question, I think. What is more important? Stable glucose readings or just lower overall? My readings swing from 103 to 153. Thank you.
Okay. Stability is less important. Lower overall is more important. The hemoglobin A1C, the average being in the 5.0 to 5.5 range is a better way of looking at diabetes than does it ever go up, because a combination of factors happens. If you happen to be stressed one day and you ate some carbs and now you're 160 and they go, you have diabetes, you're too high. And on other days when you're not stressed and it comes down low and you're 50 and then you're swinging like that. That's actually not that important. It's meaningful. You don't want that all the time. You don't want the stress, and that does make you insulin resistant. But the average, if your average can be in the normal, 5.0 to 5.5 range, that'd be better.
Randy said, when I had pancreatitis, the MRI or whatever they did showed calcium deposits in my pancreas. Does this have anything to do with vitamin D?
Good question. No, this is not a vitamin D thing. Calcium deposits in the pancreas happen because you're making a bunch of enzymes in the pancreas, and they're all digestive enzymes, and the pancreas can digest itself. And so these when there's inflammation in the pancreas, you often get these calcium deposits in there because of all that enzyme activity.
This is interesting. Okay, so Julie said she didn't realize that Cinechroma had vitamin D in it. So now I'm curious, all of you guys that are on here, think about the supplements that you may be taking. Are you taking Cinechroma and vitamin D separately? Because she didn't realize that it was in her Cinechroma. So now she's going to save herself a lot of money by getting rid of the vitamin D supplement. So, we can help you guys in a lot of different ways. We just saved you some money there as well. So yes, you are correct, Julie. You don't need to take your vitamin D3 if you're taking Cinechroma. And I'd be curious to know if your vitamin D3 had vitamin K in it or not. I'm always curious about that. So yay, figured that one out. Okay. More questions about sunshine and vitamin D here. Melinda says, how many minutes of sunshine should we get?
Oh, good question. Okay. It doesn't take that much. In 20 minutes, you could make 20,000 units of vitamin D. And think about that. We're taking pills with 5,000, 10,000 on a good sunny day and during the summertime. Because if you're above I think it's the 43rd parallel, in the wintertime, you just don't make vitamin D because the sun is coming at an angle. But sunshine it doesn't take that long. It's just 20 minutes is enough. So you don't have to burn. That's the good thing. So before you put your sunscreen on, do your 10 minutes on one side, 10 minutes on the other side, and then put your sunscreen on. Then you're ready to go.
Yes, I like that. Okay. We have a note here from Lisa. Your book is wonderful. It works. I have lost 100 pounds and have kept it off by educating myself with a goal to cure my type 2 diabetes. I just bought your book and it has confirmed what I've been doing works. I added 1,200 milligrams of organic Ceylon cinnamon for 6 weeks without changing my diet, and my A1C dropped from 7.7 to 5.4. Can't wait for my next A1C lab result. Thank you for getting this life-changing information to the public.
Wow, 5.4. That's great.
Yes.
That's normal. That's non-diabetic. She cured her diabetes.
Yes. They say you can't do, so good job.
Good work.
Okay, John. Yes. John says, I have osteoporosis in addition to type 2 diabetes. You mentioned that you should take vitamin 3 instead of medicine. I'm taking Prolia in addition to the D3 in Cinechroma. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's just that the osteoporosis medications primarily work in one way, and that's by killing osteoclasts so that the bones can't remodel. And it prevents you from getting calcium out of your bones. So it messes up the calcium, the stability of the calcium in the body. And it also messes up the bones because the bones don't remodel, so they don't make strong bone. The new bone is brittle. That's why people that take those medications, and I'm not talking about Prolia, I'm talking about Fosamax would be, and those kind of bisphosphonates. People get jaw necrosis when they get a tooth pulled because they can't remodel the bone, and so they lose the blood supply and it gets necrosis. And then we've been seeing a lot of people who are on osteoporosis medications. They get weird fractures, things that you never see, like mid-shaft femur fractures in the leg. The femur is like a thick bone, and it's got a ton of calcium. And then it just goes crack because it can't remodel, so it doesn't get strong.
Wow. That would be painful too.
Yeah.
Julie says, how many weeks on phase 1 when can you move to phase 2 after your readings are in the 90s? Julie also said, I weighed 230 pounds. I'm now 212.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you're in the 90s, you're on phase 1 and your sugar readings are in the 90s, can you move to phase 2?
Yeah. Yeah. If you're below 100, the ideal place to be is between 70 and 90. But if you're consistently in the 90s, you can move on to phase 2 and keep measuring and see how the different foods affect your blood glucose.
Yes. Okay. So a couple more questions then about people who are taking vitamin D3 with calcium, and then they're also taking synochroma. I think we've had 2 more questions about that. Is calcium a necessary supplement? Let's ask that first.
Calcium, there's plenty of calcium in foods. It's not necessary that you supplement calcium. It's not a bad supplement, and a lot of people do. But if you're eating good food, if you're eating things that have calcium in it, then you're fine. We had somebody get toxic on kale because it has something called oxalic acid that binds calcium. And so don't eat too much kale. But if you're eating a variety of foods, there's a lot of calcium. And if you're getting enough vitamin D, you should be able to absorb that.
Great. We have a couple questions. I know Dr. Saunders has to go, so I'm just going to ask these both. Someone is asking what to do about neuropathy, and then someone is asking what to do about the effects of retinopathy. And those are big topics. I know that.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we should dig into some of those again, maybe soon.
Yeah. We've done these. We have an old webinar on neuropathy and an old webinar on retinopathy too. So if you have retinopathy, man, you've got to deal with that right away. You don't want to lose your eyesight. That's really important. And just taking a pill like synochroma is, or either synochroma or Nervala is not going to be necessarily the answer for that. You have to control the blood sugar first and foremost, because you've got to be able to get glucose across the blood-brain barrier into the cell. And that's more important than the supplements. So insulin sensitivity is the most important thing you can do for both the neuropathy and the retinopathy. And then the supplements are secondary.
Okay. How many times a day should you check your blood sugar?
Wow, if you had a CGM, continuous glucose monitor, it would be every 5 minutes, which is kind of awesome. But otherwise, if you have type 2 and you're under pretty good control, just once a day in the morning, just to see where your fasting glucose is a good idea.
Someone's asking if they can take synochroma with metformin and Jardiance.
Metformin and Jardiance synochroma. Yes, those are fine.
This is a really good question. Maybe you stumbled on this webinar and you might be pre-diabetic, like Ronnie is, or maybe you have no idea if you are pre-diabetic or diabetic. How do you go about getting your blood sugar levels checked?
Okay, good question. So if you can go online and order your own test, get 4 tests. Get an insulin level, a glucose level, and the glucose is usually in the comprehensive metabolic panel. You'll find it there. And then get an insulin, glucose, C-peptide, and the hemoglobin A1C. And those are all 4, and they're for different reasons. The glucose tells you what your glucose is right now, and in 5 minutes it's going to be different. The C-peptide tells you, the hemoglobin A1C tells you what your average glucose is over about 3 months. The C-peptide tells you what your insulin is average over a few hours, and the insulin level tells you what your insulin level is right now. So you have the right now, and then the average, and that's where you get the idea of, okay, how's my pancreas functioning, and what kinds of things do I need?
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Saunders, very much.
You're welcome.
God bless your
Thank you.
patients. We'll see you tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
All right. All right, guys, if you aren't familiar with our Healthy Heart webinar, we do that on Thursdays at 12 noon Central. And so that's why I told Dr. Saunders I'd see him tomorrow. So if you haven't registered for that, that's another free webinar where we're focusing on the heart, what to do to prevent heart disease. Maybe you've been diagnosed with heart disease and you want to know what you can do with that naturally. And so you can ask your questions there, just like we do on this webinar. Register at bartonwebinar.com. Again, that is where you can find more information about our YouTube channel, our products. Maybe you want the diabetes solution kit, or we have a healthy heart solution kit. You can find all of that there. So use code webinar25 to save 25%. But again, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Tell a friend, come back next week, same time, same place. And we are excited that you were able to be here. Be blessed. We'll see you soon.